We are here in my poorly lit living room because it's storming outside, so what better time to read. Jane is here. Here he is. Here he is. He's here. There are ferrets loose in the room. Could not be a more auspicious start. By the way, I'm wearing my Slytherin shirt. We no longer stand J.K. Rowling here. It's just a really comfortable shirt and I was too lazy to change. It's comfy, okay? So, as you probably know, we are reading The Ables. But if you are new and have not done a read-along with me before, they behave a little bit differently from what many people refer to as a read-along. We sit down and I read this book and I tell you what's going on and I commentate on it in a hopefully humorous and also hopefully educational way. Sort of an edutainment, if you will. Looking at the book and making jokes as well as picking out things that we as authors can learn from, what it does well and what it does poorly. This is the book by the creator of CinemaSins. It says so right there. The only adornment that this cover has is this little fake sticker up here from the creator of CinemaSins. And honestly, this book looks very self-published to me. It's very simple. Like, look at the back. That is so simple. And there's no, like, I was looking to see how many pages it was, and there's no inner page on the back. It just ends. There's nothing. There are 364 pages, and the words are rather small, so this might be more of a challenge than I thought. What did I get myself into? I don't know, but I have tea and chocolate. So we're just probably going to read the first chapter to start us out. Should I read the back? I usually read the back, don't I? Philip Salinger has just been informed about his genetically inherited telekinetic abilities and has no idea how his blindness will affect them. Tomorrow, he starts his first day at a high school exclusively for empowered kids, but he'll face adversity right out of the gate, as he finds himself segregated and ignored with the other disabled students in a superhero version of special education class. As the entire city of Freepoint faces a devastating threat, the town leadership chooses bureaucratic infighting over actual preparation. Philip and his friends must find a way to work together to maximize their powers and overcome their disabilities. A mysterious figure has been making unannounced visits to Freepoint, kidnapping key figures and digging up ancient artifacts, and taunting Philip's group of friends with tantalizing clues and maddening riddles. Is it the Riddler? Is the Riddler here? Will Philip and his company decipher the clues and solve the mystery before the dark shadow falls over the entire town and threatens to cover the entire planet in permanent darkness? Our main character is blind, so permanent darkness wouldn't actually hamper him all that much. Superhero books are a really hard sell. Superhero books are a dead genre right now, and they have been for a while. We might go ahead and find out that the publishing agency that this book claims used might just be him. He bought his own publishing agency. So let's go ahead and look up this agency. Clovercroft Publishing. Let's look them up. Okay, they are a self-publishing company, it looks like. Okay, they are custom publishing. I almost wonder if this is kind of a vanity publishing company. But this might just be as simple as, like, they will help you make a book and print it out. They might just be kind of a version of, like, CreateSpace or whatever on Amazon. So this is actually kind of self-published, which is why it looks so bare bones. So it's kind of, I don't know how much it costs, I'm not going to go that deep, I'm not interested. But it's kind of maybe a medium between doing everything yourself and getting traditionally published. That's about all the research I'm going to do. You can feel free to look further in, but you know me, I'm not a big research person. So let's get started. Like I said, there's really, like, there should be a few more pages in here. We've got the title page here, and then copyright stuff, and then it goes right into the prologue, and it's not very attractive the way it goes into the prologue either. So I hope he didn't pay a lot for this. Also, I hate prologues, but let's see if this prologue gives us anything I don't think we could get from the rest of the book. So no, this prologue doesn't do jack shit. The only thing it tells you is that the main character is blind, and that superheroes apparently are hidden in this world, like people don't know about them, or he mentions like a world within worlds, so maybe there's alternate dimensions or something like that. But these are things that we could easily get from the book, and he spends some time being like, I'm sorry I won't be able to give you visual details, but trust me, it'll be fine. And it's like, don't tell us this, just show us through the story. I have a feeling this is going to be a rather telly book. The formatting is weird, and I know because I've made this mistake myself, and if this was formatted by professionals, as the website claimed, I would ask for my money back. Because as you can see, they do not indent the paragraphs. It's like as though you were writing it, in your Word program or whatever. And I've done this too, so I can speak to the incorrectness of it. Possibly it is intentional. It is difficult to figure out like how you're supposed to do it if you're doing it yourself, but if you're paying somebody else to do it, they should do it right. So right away I'm noticing another thing that I struggle with. I think I'm getting better, but that is too much. When you write a sentence, it's a good sentence, it's an informative sentence, it can be on its own, but there's always a temptation to continue to elaborate on it, to continue to qualify it. So even the first paragraph. I was 12 years old when my father had the talk with me, and it was the single greatest moment of my life. Okay, that's fine. But he keeps going. It didn't start out too well, but it turned around pretty quickly. Didn't need that. Keeps going. To say that it was a turning point for me personally would be an understatement of the highest order. Okay, that is officially too much. And he does it in the next paragraph as well. I'm sure you're wondering if 12 isn't maybe a bit old for the talk. Okay. That's exactly what I thought as well. Don't need that. I had picked up most of what I figured I would ever need to know just by listening to people. Honestly, I had long since congratulated myself on being one of the lucky few whose parents didn't feel the need to sit down and explain where babies come from. Surely the talk would have come before now. I thought I was free and clear. Most of that paragraph does not need to exist. And it's very tempting to just keep piling on and piling on as you're writing, especially at the beginning of your book, because you want to prove yourself. This author is definitely very much like trying to shove the voice of this character in our faces and be like, he's one of those Percy Jackson types. He's like a little bit sassy. Definitely sort of an adult writing a teenager kind of feel to it. I would have started it with the next sentence. Eliminate these top two paragraphs completely and say, I suspected something was up almost as soon as Dad said word one. Son. How strong is that of an opening? How strong? Eliminate these two paragraphs explaining about not expecting to have the talk and all that stuff. Beginnings are hard. Beginnings of books are difficult. You want to make sure that you are keeping them dynamic and interesting to read. I can tell that this guy is going to be one of those guys who explains everything, and I really don't want that. Now he has to explain like the levels of seriousness of talks with his dad, and it's like, oh, please don't. Please don't. You could eliminate these three paragraphs as well, where he talks about the levels of seriousness in conversations with his dad and what various things like being called son mean. Just get rid of them and just get to the part where his dad is actually having the talk with him, please. Stop explaining. Oh my gosh, I'm already so annoyed with this guy, with this author, and I'm on page 2. But Dad walked into the room somewhat casually from the sound of it, hands in the pockets of his suit pants. He always wore dress pants, always, without exception. None of this is necessary. Why? Why am I being told this? And also, like, did your dad tell you he always wears dress pants? Like, how do you know he always wears dress pants? Remember, everyone, just like I told you when we were reading The Cellar, if I sass this blind character for being dumb or inconsistent, he is a fictional character written by a cited person. So, yes. And if you are wondering, I do have, or I had, blind family members. My aunt and uncle were both blind. They went blind with retinitis pigmentosa in their teens, and I was fairly close with my aunt while she was alive. I have had some experience with blind people, so I'm not completely clueless. Obviously, I don't have as much experience as if, say, my aunt and uncle were still alive, but I'm not completely clueless when it comes to blindness. Oh, I can already tell this is going to be a rough ride. This guy is definitely a novice author, and no one has gone in and fixed some of the easy things to fix. He qualifies a lot of things. Great, he said, in somewhat of a forced manner. In somewhat of a forced manner is so clunky. Just say, great, he said, in a forced manner, or great, he said, his voice sounded forced, or even great, his voice sounded forced. Like, find ways to shorten things. More words doesn't equal better. Every single paragraph I'm going to have a problem. How long is this chapter? I'm just like, I'm going to have to get over it to some extent if I'm going to get through this damn book. Just trust me that almost every single paragraph is too long, has too much repeated information, just repeated in a slightly different way, and has too many words. And we'll move on. Just assume that pretty much every paragraph I come to is like that. Here's a little trick though, in your own writing. You know what you can do? You can Google common filler words, common filter words, and then once you know what they are, you can search them in your document and find ways to replace them with stronger words or eliminate them entirely. You don't need a big fancy editor to help you with this. Okay, he's got a mom and a little brother named Patrick. I'm already getting chocolate on my book. This is great. So Patrick acts very young, but he's 11, so you're younger than our main character. I wonder if we're going to find out that Patrick has some kind of disability, such as autism, or if he's just very, very rambunctious. This seems like weirdly ominous. The dad is like trying to have this talk with him. He's like, alright, let's go for a drive. And now he's talking about a friend of his who has a farm, and it definitely sounds like he's planning to take his child out to the farm and set him loose like he's a dog they don't want anymore. We learn that his town is a small town, the town of Freepoint, but he comes from New York City, so he's a city boy out in the country. He's talking about how he will be going to school in a little while, and the high school and middle school are in the same school, and yep, that's pretty accurate. I'm in a small town where that is true. There are glimmers of something that could be good in here if this guy would just get out of his own head. It didn't take a person too long to get from one end of Freepoint to the other, usually just 5 minutes or so, at least by car, after a couple songs on the radio. I would change it to, it didn't take a person too long to get from one end of Freepoint to the other, just a couple songs on the radio. That would be a really cool way to show how a blind kid might measure distance, how long it takes to get somewhere by songs on the radio. But this guy just keeps throwing more and more words at it, like he's got to win some sort of word prize. Also, for a book about a blind kid that promised us that we would be using our other senses to experience the world, none of those other senses have been described. He says he goes down a long gravel driveway. Let us hear the stones under the car's tires. Let us feel the bumpiness instead of just telling us what's happening. The dad is describing what they're seeing to his son as they're walking down a path between the cornfields, but let us hear the sound of the corn blowing in the wind. There's a distinct sound that corn makes, just rustling against itself in the wind. The dad could be like, we're surrounded by corn, and the kid could be like, you don't say, I can hear it. There's a picnic table that they're sitting on. What does that feel like? You're gonna steal my slippers again, Gall? Yeah, you're playing? This is my chunky boy Gall, my son, who is frosting, and he's trying to steal my slippers. He also has the hiccups. Ferret hiccups are very cute. Yes, he's trying to steal my slippers. Go on, you. I only just got one of my slippers out of the couch where he put it. Again, you can show us what he's doing. His dad is trying to fumble his way through this conversation. Show us our main character fidgeting. Show us him wringing his hands or twitching his leg or something instead of just being like, I was mortified. And of course, this was all leading up to a humorous misunderstanding where the kid's like, Dad, I know what you're trying to tell me, and the dad's like, you do? But then, of course, we get the twist, which was given to us on the back of the book, that the main character is a superhero. Of course, we get a brief explanation that our main character has excellent hearing because he's blind, but they don't show us that. We're just told that it's true. Well, at least the author acknowledges how stupid the name for his superheroes is, because the dad's like, son, you're going to be a custodian, and the kid's like, I'm going to be a janitor?
Why is that? Because you're afraid you can't take me?
No, it's because of this. Boys! You know where to take them.
Why custodian? Like, were all the other superhero names taken? Every single one? There were a lot of ellipses in this too, and I was trying to be kind because I do use ellipses in my dialogue, because I kind of have an obsession with writing the dialogue the way it flows in my head, so the way I hear the characters speak it, and I try to write it as much that way as I can, the way that they're speaking, but there's such a thing as too many, and we all have to work to keep it to a minimum. They do have superhero comic books in this world, and they're called superheroes in the comic books, so I don't know how these poor people got stuck being called custodians. Also, his dad is telling him this in the most uninteresting way possible for us. He's just telling him everything. Like, wouldn't it be cooler if his dad demonstrated his superpowers and was like, you could do this too? We do find out why they moved to the small town. It's a completely custodian town, so it's just a town of superheroes. And apparently, again, the superheroes in this world fly under the radar, and superheroes that have memory erasing powers or memory manipulating powers take care of that mostly. It's very Wizarding World-y. They do have some muggles. I'm going to call them muggles, even though that's not what they're called in this. And remember, we don't stand J.K. Rowling here, but we will steal her word. People who do not have powers, they do have some here who are, like, assisting the custodians. And after learning that he's a superhero, our main character mostly just feels relief that his dad didn't actually want to talk to him about sex. I know that would be the first thing I would think if I was told that I was a superhero. They're both laughing because they thought it was going to be the sex talk, and it's not. But the dad's like, oh, I thought I would just never have the sex talk with you. I thought you would just pick it up from life. What? Parents do better than this, Dad. Have an actual talk with your kids. It's super important that you have a talk, and don't just assume they're going to glean all the important information from their peers. No. And TV. No. So we find out, again, through telling, in the most bland way possible, that our main character's grandfather was the one who does all, which is not a superhero with every power. It is a superhero who can absorb the powers of those who are near him. So as long as he has the right heroes near him, he can do any of the things that they can do, which I'm 1000% certain is going to be our main character once he gets around his team of super friends. His superhero name was the Everyman. What? I think Jeremy Scott is trying. He knew Custodians was a stupid name, and he's just leaning into it. The prologue implied that this kid was blind since birth. Now, we don't know how blind, because it is a spectrum, whether you completely see nothing, or whether you can see light, or movement, or things like that. There's a whole range that is encompassed by blindness. He is learning about his grandfather and his grandfather's, superhero outfit. And he says, I instantly pictured a small blue and silver figurine my father had always kept in the glass cabinet in his office. How do you know that it's a blue and silver figurine? Like, I guess maybe it's telling us that he can see color? But, I really wish that it was clearer. This book is telling us everything. Can it not tell us how much this kid can see so I can keep track of how much to make fun of this sighted author writing a blind kid? Granddad was killed by a notorious supervillain named Artemis, which probably means that Artemis is going to be our main villain here too. That's my prediction. This kid has yet to ask what his superpower is. His dad is like, you're a superhero. And he's like, tell me about my grandfather. No, ask what your power is going to be. I just had the worst thought. What happens if a blind kid gets powers like Cyclops? You can't see to aim your eyeball lasers. Somebody else has to, aim you. I have no way of knowing if Mr. Scott got any blind sensitivity readers. Or if he has blind family members who helped him with this, but I have very strong suspicions that he didn't. He finally asked what his superpower is. So his dad's like, why, it's telekinesis, son. And the main character doesn't know what telekinesis is. He reads superhero comics. None of them had telekinesis? His dad explains that to use telekinesis, you have to be very familiar with the object you're trying to move, which seems a bit weird. You have to have an understanding of it. And most telekinetic people use their eyes to do that. But this kid can't because he's blind. Although, again, we don't know how blind. Obviously, that's going to be a challenge for him, is that he will have to touch everything, presumably, before he can move it. So Dad is trying to teach him how to use his power, and they're using his phone because he's very familiar with his phone. And he set it on the ground and is trying to, use force, pull it up into his hand, and he's failing. And then he asks his dad how his dad knows that he has this power. And apparently they can tell by your DNA what power you have. I doubt that's going to come up later, but that seems like it would be really useful. And I wonder if there's a DNA database of everyone's powers. I'll be honest, I'm skimming this whole how to move the phone lesson. It's really boring. Here's another thing that might be an interesting thing to use for the author to use in this book. He was pulling the phone up towards his hand, but because he couldn't see it, he didn't realize it. So he gave up, and then he heard it fall back to the ground. And I think that would be a really cool thing to play with, that he sometimes just doesn't know that he's using his power because he can't see that he's using his power. And that's the end of that chapter. Wow. Oh yes, I'm using my new bookmark from that art haul that I did. Go check out the art haul. As I promised, it is going to be my bookmark for read-alongs, but woof, that was worse than I anticipated. I hope that I can make this interesting. Some of these read-alongs start out a bit shaky, so I hope you'll stick with me because they usually get fun once we get our inside jokes, once we get into the plot. But the writing is worse than I thought it would be. The skill is just not there. And I think it's because this guy just doesn't have the experience. You have to practice a lot to be a writer. You can't just crank out one thing and call it good. I think there are inklings that if he kept practicing, he could get much better. But I don't know if he will. But that's where we're at so far with chapter 1. Thank you everyone for watching that video. You guys rock, but you know who rocks even more? That's right. My patrons being Callison, Lennox, Ray, Artemis, Shelby, Zaire, Adrienne, Jesper, Ryakio, Irene, Sabby Panda, Scribbling Cat, Savvy, Jenny, Amanda, and Lisa. Have you ever heard of a better batch of patrons in your entire life? I bet you haven't. My patrons are the best, and you can fight me. If I go crazy, then will you still call me Superman? If I'm alive and well, will you be there holding my hand? I keep you by my side with my superhuman might. Kryptonite.